Hey guys, welcome to Currently Cringing. And today I have a really special guest. We have Dr. Rachna Buxani, who is also a family friend. But I think what's important here is that she's a licensed mental health counselor with over 23 years of experience across not only the United States, but Dubai and the Cayman Islands. She's the founder of Buxani Counseling Care in Miami, and she's written a powerful book called Unseen, a therapist's reflection on a daughter's journey through a narcissistic father's shadow. Now, I know most of you who are listening are women, and a lot of you who are listening right now during the holidays aren't feeling so great. And it's December, which is also Narcissist Abuse Awareness Month. I know us millennials love giving a name to every month, but this one's important. And the holidays aren't always a great time. And that's why I really wanted to record this with Dr. Buxani, because I'm sure your feed and your socials are filled with happy content, and not everyone's happy at this time. But welcome, Dr. Buxani.
Thank you, Anisha. So nice being with you. And thank you for helping me spread the awareness. I think too many people suffer in silence. I think it's time to break that silence. I think it's time to be seen and heard.
So tell us about yourself for the audience. Obviously, I know you very well, but you've worked in multiple countries. How did that international experience shape your understanding of family dynamics?
So I think the one thing that I understood is that it doesn't matter the culture, it doesn't matter the country. The family dynamics that people struggle with are really the same. So, whether I'm dealing with somebody in Dubai, or whether I was dealing with people in the Cayman Islands or here, people struggle with the same things, right? So it isn't different. It's just, maybe the language is different, maybe the festivities where they gather are different, but really the challenges that we all go through kind of goes across cultures.
What drew you to specialize in trauma and family dysfunction, especially being a South Asian woman? I think that's really unique considering there's a lot of South Asian trauma, even though our listeners are from everywhere. But I find it interesting that you chose to specialize in family
Yeah.
dysfunction.
So I'll tell you something. It wasn't happenstance. I didn't go in thinking that, okay, this is what I want to specialize in. But here's what I noticed, Anisha, when people came in, and most people come in because and the most widespread things that people come in are for anxiety, for depression, and it's almost like a revolving door. Because you see, and mental health traditionally has been very symptom focused. So if somebody comes in with anxiety, I'm sitting over there, I'm giving them tools, I'm giving them tips. Ultimately, I might refer them to a psychiatrist. They go get meds for that, right? And they still don't feel better. So that's where I started, figuring out that, okay, we're not even scratching the surface of this thing, right? Because we all we're doing is we are, targeting the surface level symptoms that are coming across, but we really have to get to the root. We have to get to the why. And the why, in most instances, are the small t traumas. So we do have to help people heal from that. If we ever want to, help them cope with their anxiety, depression symptoms, ADHD symptoms, a lot of that is related to trauma. So when I started seeing that, I just shifted my focus and I started, kind of focusing more on, okay, let's get to the root of this. And therein, then I took a training in IFS, which I think is a beautiful, beautiful technique for trauma therapy, and kind of got into that world and really enjoy it. Enjoy helping people heal.
Do you want to explain IFS to the listeners?
I will. So, IFS is internal family systems. It's one of the upcoming trauma techniques, and lovely, lovely. I think it's one of the most compassionately complete techniques that we have, because it really what it does is it helps people, come to self, because somewhere along the way, so the philosophy of IFS is that we all are born with that true self. Now, somewhere along the way, because of our experiences, it's kind of covered. Because, I might go through experiences in my childhood and I might have these protective parts that kind of cover this self. So then I'm not operating from self anymore. And self has, calm, clarity, courage, confidence, all the wonderful things. But somewhere along the way, those protective parts, and they're doing a good job because they're protecting me from something that I may have gone through. But healing those protective parts then lets that self come through, and I can live my authentic life and I can feel great.
I love that. Well, let's dive in. Let's start with the basics. When people hear narcissism, they often think of someone who's just self-absorbed or takes too many selfies. But you're right
Yeah.
that not all narcissism looks the same. Can you
Yeah.
help us understand what narcissism is and then the types of
Yes.
narcissism that you've outlaid in your book? Because I didn't know there were types of narcissism.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's where most people get confused because, our traditional sense of a narcissist is the person who's taking the selfies. And I want to say they are the least of our concerns.
Yeah.
They can keep taking selfies all they want, and I think we need to understand narcissism in a continuum. We have to know that it's not whether you have or don't have. You have narcissism. So people who have narcissism, the traits, they have it in a continuum. So at the like the beginning or the starting point is those people with the selfies, right? But again, they're harmless. So it's okay. Continue taking your selfies if you want to. But the other end of that continuum is the malignant narcissist, and that's dangerous, and that's where we get confused. But let's talk about the types, and then maybe that will help explain it. So the first one we know is the grandiose narcissist. So the DSM, which is a diagnostic and statistical manual, which is the kind of Bible that we go off of, right? It's the book of medical illness, mental illnesses, not medical illness, sorry, mental illnesses. So all of the mental illnesses are highlighted over there, and the narcissism that's in the DSM is the grandiose. So that's the person who's really entitled, who needs that constant validation, who is arrogant, flamboyant. So that's the grandiose narcissist. Then we have the vulnerable narcissist. Now that's where people really get confused because the vulnerable narcissist actually looks very different. They're not necessarily, so they have all that, the entitlement and the arrogance and everything of the grandiose, but their presentation is very different. They present as more, woe is me, I am the victim of, everything I would have been. I could have done so well if only this world realized who I am and given me a chance, right? So that's your vulnerable narcissist. These people have, the failure to launch, but failure to launch, and then they'll blame everybody else for that. So it's really not them who's defected. It's almost like they want to feel special so bad, but they have nothing special about them, and that upsets them. So they, go around the world in a very grumpy, very like, I hate everybody around me. So that's kind of, your vulnerable narcissist presentation. Then we have communal narcissists. The communal narcissist is very interesting, because they do everything good for everyone, right? So they are out there in the community really doing well. And we all know somebody like that. They are, oh my gosh, I want to do this charitable thing. I want to, give to this community. And the thing is, but the guiding force is that I need admiration for what I'm doing. And they get very upset, very angry when they don't get that admiration for what they're doing for people, right? Then we have the self-righteous narcissist. This is like morality to the T, but morality not like I need things done right and wrong, but everybody else needs to be following the same pattern. but they take it to an extent. Like I know somebody who I met, one of these actors, and we had gone to see him, and my sister at that point, she had just delivered her baby, so we're taking the baby on God, and he was taking so much time that she started breastfeeding. He came and he was so offended because it was timing. I am here now. You need to, like, what are you doing? Get on with it. This is the time that I had given you. So it's not that very rigid, not flexible at all in if somebody's arriving 5 minutes late for dinner. Oh my gosh, no, that you can't do that, right? So that's the self-righteous, because they use morality almost as a weapon. Not no, not as okay, I am a good person with a good moral standing. Then we have the neglectful narcissist. The neglectful narcissist, listen, they don't care about anyone. For them, everybody is just a tool to use. So if I'm going to have any sort of relationship with you, that's because I want to use you. And then when you're done, I'm done. I have no zero connection with anyone. So that's the neglectful. And the worst of the kind is the malignant narcissist. So the malignant narcissist, Dr. Rabini explains it very well, and she talks about how it's the station right before psychopathy.
Okay.
So this is a person who is, has traits of psychopathy, has Machiavellianism, completely fine using people, throwing people. In fact, can ruminate about how to make another person's life difficult. So it's really a dangerous. You see, malignant narcissists have coercive control, violence, aggressiveness. So all of that kind of comes under the umbrella of the malignant narcissist.
And now your book, Unseen, is about a narcissistic father and the
Mm.
relationship with the daughter who was also your client, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
now, what's unique about that relationship when the father is a narcissist? And I know a lot of people listening and a lot of people who are watching this have probably experienced this.
yes. So first of all, when I was writing this book, I had no idea that there is no such book that exists, between a father and a daughter. So I think it was very important. And it was important anyways to get the message across, but I think it became even more important knowing that there is no such book, right? So what is unique about, the for a daughter to have a narcissistic father, she basically has to have no sense of self. Her only existence is to please the father. Her only use is what the father decides, right? So when the narcissistic parent, usually there are roles that children get into, but that's her role. She has no role beyond that. That identity, the self is just not there. And there is no way, Anisha, of having that self when you have a father like that. Now that then trickles on to your other relationships. So now you have a husband who you're playing the same role. Whether that husband is a narcissist or not is so irrelevant, because the role that you've played, the fact that you cannot have that sense of self, the fact that you cannot have an identity, that kind of goes on to your relationships with your husband, your children, your boyfriends, if you have, if you've had, and it really deteriorates any sort of survival or existence that you have, in this world, because you just can't. You were never allowed. You were never given that voice. So that, I think, is unique in that relationship between, the daughter, and then comes the intergenerational trauma, right? So if I as a mother have had that trauma, I'm going to pass it on to my kids, right? Because if I don't have a sense of self, if I don't have an identity, if I'm maybe insecure, I'm fearful of abandonment, like, how my client was, guess where all of that is going?
Yeah.
It's going into all my relationships. So, it it is almost impossible for that person then to go on having any sort of fulfilling relationships. But then now we talk about her children. How will they turn out, right? Because now they are going to carry the same trauma. And, because she's so unavailable or emotionally detached or, paranoid about, wanting to trust people because she's been so let down. So it just goes on and on. So I think it's really important for children to understand that, the family systems that they come from and what effect that might have had. Because otherwise you start thinking that there's something wrong with you, that I'm just like that. I was born like that. No, maybe you weren't. There's stuff that happened to you in your life that resulted in this, but healing is possible.
Yeah.
And you can get to having a fulfilling relationship, not only with the people around you, but with yourself.
Yes. And you touched on this briefly. In your chapter, The Narcissistic Family System, you describe the different roles that children get assigned. Can you walk us through these roles? And I found this fascinating as well.
Yes. Yes. So the first one is the golden child. So the golden child is, so the father or the mother, right? But in this case, the father um, picks one of the children who he feels reflects him the best. And that's the golden child. So that child is on the pedestal. You don't want to be on the pedestal. You really don't. Because the golden child also grows up with a lot of insecurity, because if you're on the pedestal, you can be off the pedestal at any point, right? So they go on with this constant desire or need that I just have to please the parent. Like, if as long as I'm doing everything that the parent does, they're okay, right? But the golden child is also given a lot. So they get praised, they're admired by by the father in this case, or the narcissistic parent. And so a lot of times the golden child grows up to be narcissistic themselves. Okay. Then we have the scapegoat. Now, the scapegoat is again picked in the family, and it's a the child who brings about insecurity in the parent. This, the narcissist, remember, one of the biggest misconceptions about narcissists is that they love themselves. They actually don't. They hate
It
themselves,
themselves.
right? So, I mean, it's almost like they're disgusted with themselves and parts of themselves. Now, if they see those parts that they hate about themselves in the child, that's the child that will be picked as being the scapegoat, right? So now that's, so they are taunted, they are put down, abused, could be physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and that child is blamed for everything that goes wrong. Everything is the scapegoat's fault. Then we have the invisible child, which is what my client was, who really I mean, you're there, you're not there. Like, you're an inconvenience. So
Right.
as long as this child continues to follow the rules and do whatever, like you cannot take up space in your narcissistic parent's life, because if you fall sick, oh my gosh, you're an inconvenience. How can you do that? So it's really like, you don't exist. Let's continue not existing, because that's kind of what works for the narcissist. We have the peacemaker or the fixer. Um, this one is a person who almost, and there's certain roles, like we've talked about in the book, I've talked about the assistant or the peacemaker, the fixer. These are different roles that are assigned to kids who really have to, like, the assistant is okay, you're there just to fulfill whatever needs to be done in the household, and really that's it. I mean, your your worth is that. The peacemaker and the fixer is the person who kind of feels like, okay, what can I do? What can I, like, let me just, because there's so much chaos. Or if we just clean, everything has to be okay, then dad won't get upset, right? Or, if you just keep quiet, just do whatever he wants, because it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. So the peacemaker is that person who feels like, okay, I just need to make sure that everybody is okay. And sometimes those roles are also so, the scapegoat can also be the peacemaker, right? So sometimes those roles also get like one child can play more than one role.
Okay.
So, like in my client's life, I think she was the invisible child, but she was also the peacemaker, to a certain, because she, not only was, her role to be invisible, but she was also that person who was like, okay, what can we do to just like, she would make jokes, just to calm down the situation. She took it upon herself. So some of those roles are assigned, and some of those roles are adopted by kids who find themselves in these situations.
And they can be interchangeable. You're not locked into one role
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think in her life, she played a few different roles at few
Yeah.
different times. But the predominant one happened to be the invisible child, which is why unseen.
Yes. And what role does the non-narcissistic parent play?
Unfortunately, many times it's the role of the enabler, right? And I don't know, Anisha, if that's the role that's taken upon because they want to enable the narcissist, or it's a survival mechanism. Because remember, the narcissistic parent is also a narcissistic spouse, right?
Yeah.
So there is definitely, coercive control over there. There's definitely abuse over there. So I don't know if if the non-narcissistic parent just becomes that enabler because they're just trying to survive. They're just trying to take care of themselves. In her case, her mother was absent,
Yes.
very non, and that's why the mother is not really mentioned that much in the book
Yeah.
because she wasn't there. So, it's not like the mother was that person who she could go to and say, okay, my dad is who he is. I can't change that, but at least I have the support of my mom. She did not have that. Um, and I would tend to think that either that was because mom had been through her own share and just decided that forget about you guys. I need to like survive this. So I'm going to do what it takes to survive. And sometimes they become the enabler because what they do is, and I've seen that in some of my clients where the moms will actually be like, can you just do what he wants? Can you just, like, because explaining to him is not going to work. So let's get the children to do whatever he needs so that I don't have to bear the brunt of them not doing.
Right. Makes
So a lot
total
of
sense.
times I've seen that.
And these families you mentioned in the book, they typically look successful on the outside.
They do. And because the narcissists, look, and that's the dichotomy of this whole thing. Because, here we are, we tell people that, listen, if you can, don't get into a relationship with a narcissist. But at a society level, those are the very things that we're trying to reinforce. Oh, but you like look at this person. He's so successful. He's so charming. He's so, he has so much money. He's, the CEO of a company. So those are the things we're trying to reinforce, and at the same time, we're telling people, okay, but can you not get into a relationship with a narcissist? So it's very, very confusing. And yes, in her case, it was a very successful family from the outside. It was a picture perfect family that she came from. And because also these family systems, remember, a narcissist, along with being insecure, is a very paranoid person. So they almost ingrain from when you are a child, don't go talk to anyone,
Yes.
don't tell, like family is family. And that's also a cultural thing because I see that a lot with the with our culture, with the Hispanic culture, that okay, it doesn't matter, take it to your grave, you're not going to talk about this to anybody. So part of it is that, and part of it is just the narcissist being that paranoid that you're just like, no, 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 I cannot. And sadly, so, Anisha, there's also an idealization. Like when my client came to me, she idolized her father. She had no clue that she came from a narcissistic, upbringing. I mean, these are not things that even. like if you say 10, 15 years, nobody was talking about narcissism, right? So
Oh, what?
she had no idea that, oh my gosh, that's what was going on. That's crazy. She, and when she realized it was a profoundly grief-ridden moment, because she almost, felt like, wow, my whole life was stolen from me, and I didn't even know that.
Yes.
So there's a lot of grief in even the realization that that's kind of what has happened.
Yeah, that's actually my next question. There's a section in your book called World Opening Up, and it's the moment when someone starts to see their experience clearly for the first time. Can you describe what that process looks like from a medical perspective? What happens when you help someone name what they've lived through? Is it relief? Is it anger? Are they in shock?
Everything, all of the above. So we take it very slow. I couldn't tell her. At some point I knew, but I really didn't label it because it's a very difficult thing for people to accept. And like I said, for her, it's her family.
Right.
It's her father who she idolized. So can't just go in and say, oh, by the way, your father was a narcissist, and that's very difficult to do. So you really have to very, very compassionately bring it up and bring it up when they are okay to hear this. And even though they are okay to hear this, those moments, and it's not a moment, it's weeks, months after that, are filled with anger, they're filled with grief, they're filled with confusion, they're filled with frustration. It's so, so hard. They like you're vacillating between I'm crying, but I'm so angry. Why didn't I know this? There's guilt. How can I be so stupid? I lived my whole life because also in her case, right, there was a guilt of, oh my gosh, I haven't been able to have a good relationship with my husband. I haven't even been able to have a good relationship. She never held her kids.
Yes.
Like she could not hug them, Anisha, and she didn't know why. So, there's so much guilt, there's so much shame, there's so much, like, so much of all those emotions that go in. And really, me as a therapist, I've just got to hold space for her
Yes.
as she's going through it because there are no easy answers. There's no, I always tell my clients, I said, trauma can be in the past, healing is never going to. There's never a past tense of healing. You're going to heal for the rest of your life from something that has happened. And, because you're going to have those moments that are going to trigger you and you're not even going to know because the body stores it in our emotion center, right? So even if I don't know, because it's not in my thinking brain that I actually save these things, these moments, but I'm going to feel it in my body. Your body is going to, and in those moments, you're going to grow. There's going to be growth in that healing. You just have to go through that journey.
Yes.
So it's really a journey. And for me as a therapist, it was really holding space for her as she went through those moments of grief, as she went through those moments of guilt and shame, as she got to that place of radical acceptance, that wow, yeah, this is never going to change, right? Because the other part of being in narcissistic relationships is that hope that, oh, maybe someday he'll realize, maybe someday he will, I'll just keep doing this and maybe someday he'll get to a point. It never comes. It never comes. So getting to that place of radical acceptance and knowing that radical acceptance does not mean that it's not going to hurt.
Yes.
So it doesn't mean that when you're with your dad next time that it's, when he acts in a certain way or when he minimizes you or devalues you, that even though yes, okay, now that he's a narcissist and this pattern is not going to change, that doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. So allowing yourself that.
And you mentioned the body, and you've made a bold statement, and I agree that narcissism is a public health issue. And what I love about that statement is that it's in your body, right? You're holding this trauma in your nervous system. So can you explain what you mean by that? Why the body remembers what the mind tries to forget, which is a chapter
Yes.
in your book.
Yes. So, couple of things here. So, the public health issue was not my, it was not my concoction. It was Dr. Ramani who first claimed, I think, at least that's where I first, and it was so, it's so true, Anisha. It is a public health issue, but it's a public health issue not necessarily for the reasons you're talking about. However, I'm going to address that too. But it's a public health issue because narcissists can be very aggressive. There is a high rate of personality disorders in people who commit domestic violence, right? So there's that aggressive element to it, and that's why it's a public health issue because narcissism, unlike other disorders. So if somebody comes to me with depression, it's affecting them. It is affecting their family to a certain extent, but really it's affecting the person who's going through it. Narcissism is one of those things that it affects the people around them much more than it affects the person who's, because they, you and I both know narcissists who are quite successful,
Right.
and that's why they feel no need to come into therapy, right? But it's the people around them who are really, really hurting, which is why it's a public health issue.
Okay.
Now let's talk about the holding. Dr. Gabor Mate, who I'm extremely fond of, talks about. He's a medical professional, and he talks about in his work how he started seeing things like autoimmune disorders, terminal illnesses related to trauma, and you see trauma, I hold on to it. My body is all, it's going to live with me. So my thinking brain may decide that for my protection, I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to think about it. Let's just forget about this because I need to continue. But my emotion brain, this emotion center holds on to this. We don't let, like, it doesn't let go till I go on this journey of healing. So, yes, absolutely, there is a lot of research that's out there that links, things like autoimmune, things like terminal illnesses to trauma, and especially the small t traumas, which, if you're okay, I'll just explain the
Yes,
difference between the
please.
small. Okay, so there are the big T traumas, which are, if you've had, if you've been raped, sexual assault or physical assault, um, when you go into war, and so those are the big T traumas, right? And they lead to, obviously PTSD. And people live with PTSD because of the big T traumas. The small T traumas, because these big T traumas are like incidents that happen in your life. The difference is that the small T traumas are bullying, invalidation, so it's chronic. It continues over years and years and years. So what happens is, think about it, your body, okay, the cortisol levels on your body are constantly high, right? Think about victims of domestic violence. I mean, they're living with that fear. Think about my client. She was living in that fear. She didn't know what to do. I mean, is dad going to come in a bad mood? Is he going to come in a good mood? How do I, like, you're constantly living with that, and so your body is like constantly high in the cortisol, thus affecting your immune system,
That's
thus resulting in terminal illnesses or autoimmune disorders. So those more and more, what we understand is those small t traumas. We have to look into that, right?
yeah.
Because we used to not even call those things trauma. But now we've started, and just to kind of differentiate, we call them the small t, but they're so harmful. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, because living in that constantly keeps you so, in a chronic state of stress. And so that results in a lot of times in what we call PTSD, which is complex PTSD.
Okay.
So that's kind of the difference.
And how is narcissistic trauma different from other types of trauma, say a car accident a hurricane, and how is it similar?
Right. So it's different because it's a small T trauma,
Okay.
right? So those things like a hurricane or the car accident, those are the big T traumas because they happen in the moment. Yes, your cortisol levels are high, and then it comes down, and then you can focus on healing, right? Narcissistic abuse is going on and on and on. So it is different because it's persistent. It keeps
Oh,
going
wait.
on, and when, and at some point, because obviously the book is about a narcissistic family, but, when we talk about narcissistic relationship cycle, there's a clear pattern of the love bombing, the devaluing, the discarding, the hoovering. But throughout that, you're constantly in a chronic state of stress. So that's how it's different than the hurricanes and the accidents and stuff. How is it similar? Because it causes some of the same outcomes,
Yeah,
right? Because you go through the PTSD, the complex PTSD symptoms. So the hypervigilance, the nightmares, like erosion of self.
yeah,
You cannot have a self. And that to me is one of the most destructive symptoms of being in a narcissistic relationship, that you lose your sense of identity.
yeah.
It's identity theft, right? So
Absolutely. You mentioned three types of empathy in your book: cognitive, emotional, and compassionate. Can you break that down for the listeners and why understanding them matters?
yes, because you know what? People are so confused about this because they if I tell them that the narcissist, because according to the DSM, narcissists have
Yeah.
a problem with empathy, right? That's a blanket statement. And then I'll have people come and say, no, no, but he does show empathy at this time or that time. Oh, but he was crying when my mom passed away. Okay. So let's talk about the different kinds of empathy. So the first is the cognitive empathy. Cognitive empathy is the knowledge of, I know that this is a situation I should feel bad in. Okay. Narcissists have that. They do know when a situation commands somebody to feel bad,
Okay.
bad, sad. Okay. The next level is the emotional empathy, which is me actually feeling bad for someone. So, oh my gosh, your mom passed away. That must feel so bad. Like I actually feel for you, right? Narcissists don't have that. Then is the compassionate empathy. That is the highest form of empathy, where not only do I feel for you, but that empathy turns into action. I want to do something to help you. That's the most, like the highest form of empathy that we have. The narcissist definitely does not have that. But the thing is, they have the cognitive empathy. So what happens is, there may be times, and I've seen that in my office, because narcissists will only come in, say I have the wife, and now the relationship is in trouble, and I always like to bring the husband in this case the husband is a narcissist,
Yeah.
or it could be flipped, but I like to get the partner in just to see. And they will. I've had them cry, I'm trying to be such a good husband, I really love her, that because they know, oh, that's the therapist.
Right.
She listens to the therapist. So they know when to put on that act, and they know when that okay, that this situation warrants me feeling sad. Let me just put it on. And that's where it gets very confusing, because then people are like, no, but look, he was crying. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because he knew he should.
Yes, absolutely. It's calculated.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Can you explain trauma bonding, especially as a millennial? For me, I see this word all the time on social media and it's being thrown around lightly. But coming
Yes.
from a professional, I think a lot of people hear this term, including me, but don't fully understand what it means. So, can you explain it to us?
Yes. I'm curious, Anisha. What do you think is trauma bonding? Because I would love to hear what the millennials think about, or the Gen Zers think
Yeah,
about what is trauma bonding.
absolutely. Again, this is all just from social media. That's where I've
Of
seen the
course.
word, that's where I heard it and learned about it. But it's maybe two or more people that had a T, right? A big T or
Yeah,
a small T happen to
yeah,
them, if we're using the lingo, and they bond on that. So,
yeah,
oh, like for example, when I was single, right?
yeah, yeah.
And all the other single girls were like, we can't find a husband. And
Ah,
then on a superficial level, that's something
yes.
we bond on. And then it turns into we hate men. And then
Yeah.
it builds on that, right? And that's something we trauma bond over in a superficial sense, right? That's the way I can describe it from my experience.
Okay. Okay.
And tell me if I'm
Okay.
wrong. You're like, that's wrong.
I'm trying. I'm,
That's why we
yeah.
have you here because we are just looking at these words on
Yes.
Instagram and we
No,
don't
no. And
really
also, when you put those two words together, it makes sense that that's what you would think. But no, that's far from
know
what
what
it
it
is.
means.
Yeah. Trauma bonded is a relationship. So a relationship is a trauma bonded relationship. A narcissistic relationship is a trauma bonded relationship. And what it means is there is a high and a low and a high and a low, the good and the bad. And that's how narcissistic relationships are. Think about, let's go back to the DV world, right?
Yeah.
So, the let's again, in this case, say, the father was abusing the daughter, right? Like physical abuse, say, but then the next day he was so nice,
Yes.
right? So, that confusion is what keeps people stuck in these relationships. And that is what trauma bonded is. So
Okay.
you're trauma bonded to that relationship because it's almost like you've created that bond with this person because what you're doing at the times that it's not good is you're trying to get it back to the good place.
Okay.
Like, okay, maybe if I do this, he'll love me again. Or maybe if I do that, or victims of domestic violence, okay, maybe if I just, keep the house clean, maybe he won't get upset, right? And you know the pattern with the DV is, okay, I'm going to, hit you today, and then tomorrow morning I'm going to send you flowers, right? And you should not have made me do that.
Right.
I love you so much, and I don't want to do that to you. So that is what trauma bonded is. It's the relationship that is governed by this constant up and down and up and down, which keeps people stuck in those relationships.
That makes so much sense. It's not what I said, which is finding something bad that happened in common with someone else and then bonding over that. That's not what it is. It's worse. It's you're in the relationship with the person causing the trauma
Absolutely.
if you're the victim.
Absolutely. Can I explain one more word that I think is
Yes,
quite
please.
misunderstood? Codependency.
Yeah, I don't understand, clearly don't understand that word either. Please
So,
explain.
listen, I have my clients who come in and they think codependent is the two people being dependent on each other.
That's what I thought.
Right, but it's not, right? And again, listen, I don't blame you because when you hear the term, it kind of makes sense that it would be
Right.
two people like codependent, but it's not. A codependent person is a person who almost especially in relationship with narcissism, it's a person who doesn't have a sense of self. So I am always doing for another person, sacrificing myself for the other person. So that's a person who's codependent. So when I do that, then I'm a codependent person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And again, I'm sure me and the listeners had never heard of that because we're just being fed information on the internet that isn't always accurate.
Right, right. And again, to award you all some compassion. The thing is, like that. It makes sense when you put those two words
Yeah.
together. That yeah, it could mean two people being dependent on
Yeah.
each other. Yeah,
Your book has a chapter called What Narcissistic Love Leaves Behind. What does it leave behind?
I think it leaves behind pieces. Because I'm going to summarize it. But I think it leaves behind a very broken sense of self that people need to work to piecing back together. It leaves people with no sense of self, no sense of identity, or a broken sense of self that really needs to be pieced back together. It also leaves behind, I think, the inability. um, to have successful relationships unless healed, right? So, and it leaves behind a huge potential of intergenerational trauma because it is going to, you're going to carry it on from generation to generation until you understand what it is and how you, go on that journey of healing. But it's a beautiful journey, Alicia. I think, when people have the courage or have the will, because the courage comes with self, but if they have the will, the desire that I want to understand, I often have people come to me and say, and this is a funny question, but the first time I meet with them as an intake, so how long is this going to take? I don't know, a
Yeah.
lifetime. You
A
know,
lifetime. Yeah.
yeah, because you are here to heal. But I think when people decide that I'm going to, because to me, therapy is a journey into yourself. It's a journey into understanding why I do what I do and to heal from those things so that I can be the best version of myself. And that sometimes can take a lifetime, sometimes can take a few years.
And in that journey of healing, once you take that step, we talked about it briefly in the beginning. You talk about internal family systems, IFS therapy.
Yes.
And how is that particularly effective for narcissistic trauma? And can you walk us through an example of what IFS might look like in practice? What happens in the session?
Okay. So I am going to because Dr. Richard Schwartz, who I had the privilege to interview for my book, he's the founder of IFS, and he has a book called No Bad Parts that I think in addition to my book, I think your listeners would love, and I highly recommend them to read it. But let's talk about IFS. There are a lot of techniques. I want to, put that out there because I tend to like IFS. And the reason I tend to like IFS is because there's a degree of self-compassion, which I think victims of narcissistic abuse need, that is, I have found to be very, very, like a very dominant part of IFS. So I feel that, showing yourself that compassion is so important when you're trying to heal from, abuse, any kind of abuse and narcissistic abuse. And IFS is a technique that kind of embodies that compassion. That is why I'm drawn to it. What IFS talks about parts, okay? And it talks about protective parts. So, again, when I have an experience, so say, let's talk about a client of mine, okay? She came to me because she has a narcissistic son, okay? She heard one of my podcasts and she came to me, she said, I need you to help me navigate this. And as we were, going through it, through therapy, because I, practice IFS, so we started underlining what her protective parts were. Her fear was that she's going to be alone. Now, she herself came from a toxic family system, okay, but she had not made that connection when she came to me. She really came to me because she thought, okay, there's a son now, I need to deal with him. But she was trying to please him. So it was important to get into, okay, why am I doing this, right? Where is this fear coming from? And we realized that her fear, when the core of it was that if I don't do this, if I don't please him, if I don't please everybody in my life, I'm going to be alone. And that went back to her history of being left alone by her father who left, okay? Who left her when she was very young. So but what she was doing, so this people pleasing became that protective part.
Okay.
Because, somewhere she learned that, look, if I keep doing things for people, then I'm not going to be alone. You see? So what IFS does is it helps me understand my fears because my fears are always linked to the protective parts. Now, the protective parts could either be managers, which is okay, but you need to not think about this, just go on with your day, function, do what you have to. So the part that's saying, okay, don't think about it is my manager part. Okay, or it could be a firefighter, which is like in the moment when I'm triggered, the firefighter part will show up and say, okay, let's blow out this fire. So, okay, a lot of addicts have very strong firefighter parts because it's like, okay, the way I'm going to cope with this is I'm just going to get drunk. So I'm not going to think about it. Or I'm going to get high on drugs because I don't want to think about it. So, what, so, and instead of condemning, what IFS does is helps you understand those parts of you, right? So why am I doing this? Because this part is trying to protect you. So ultimately, even my addiction is trying to protect me. It's trying to make me not feel those very bad feelings because it feels like, okay, but I need to protect Rachna from feeling this way. Otherwise, it's going to be really bad for her. So let's just push her to get drunk. You
Yes.
see? So it helps you build that compassion for those protective parts and helps you heal those protective parts, right? By letting that part know that because those parts were generally developed when I was younger, maybe 5, maybe 7, that part does not know that I'm 48 now,
Yeah.
right? So that maybe I'm okay. I don't need you to do, like, you're exhausted of the role that you've been doing for your life, and I'm here to tell you that I'm okay.
Yes.
I'm okay, and to relieve you of that. And then I think one of the most beautiful parts is that role then, or that part then, can adopt a different role, can adopt a role of courage, can adopt a role of confidence. And in my book, what I've done is, because Richard Schwartz, every time I've watched his interviews, and he did that with me, is let's have a session. So I've actually, you know, I literally typed out that session,
Yes.
word to word, for people to understand what that looks like one session with an IFS therapist.
Yes. And they can have that session with you.
Absolutely. They can
Yeah.
have that session with me or any IFS trained therapist. There are not too many. It's a difficult course to get accepted into, but there are definitely IFS therapists, and yes, that's what we do. And listen, here's the thing, Anisha. If you can't get an IFS therapist, doesn't matter. Go and get help from a good therapist. There are other trauma techniques too.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be IFS. It's just one that I have found a lot of healing value in, but there are other techniques too. But the most important message is go get help. There
Yeah.
is help available. Get the right help. Get help from a therapist that's trained in trauma. It could be in EMDR. It could be in cognitive behavior therapy. Trauma-based cognitive behavior therapy. It could be any of those techniques. It doesn't matter, because I'll tell you one more thing. And I tell this to people who come to me for the first time, like every client of mine. Um, the technique accounts only for 30%
Okay.
of the growth, of the change, of the progress that we see in clients. 70%, Anisha, is the relationship between the therapist and the client. If you don't trust me, I could be the greatest IFS therapist out there, which I'm not, but I could be. And it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're not going to heal. So it has to be someone who you trust, I always tell my clients, when you walk out of my door, you need to go think how you felt in our session. The most important thing is you have to feel hopeful.
Yes.
Hope is a big thing. If you don't, please don't come back to me. I am not the right person for you.
Absolutely. And I like that honesty. What do you wish more people understood about narcissistic family systems?
That it's not them.
Okay.
I wish people understood that, actually, two things. I wish people understood that it's not them who's making the narcissistic parent not like them or use them or any of that, right? And I wish people would stop trying to please the very same people who've caused hurt to them, and maybe others who are trying to cause hurt to them. Because the mindset generally of people who come from abuse is becoming a people pleaser, that I'm not good enough. I have to keep doing more and more and more. I wish people would understand that no matter what you do,
Yeah.
You're never going to be good enough.
So how do you continue your day-to-day life with a narcissist if you have one in your life and you're not cutting them off? For
Right.
people who are listening.
Yes, of course. So yes, if you can go no contact, great. But more, there's a lot of people who can't. And at that point, techniques like yellow rocking, gray rocking, whatever works, can be helpful. So so yellow rocking is basically, you're keeping your conversations at a surface level, but you're showing just enough emotion that the person doesn't feel like you are completely disinterested, right? But your conversations really have to be, you can't be vulnerable, you can't share, don't share good news, don't share bad news. They are not the people that you're going to go to for support or to celebrate. That's not going to happen. So, you can keep your conversations very surface level. um, Understand that in spite of that, when if like in this case, if you have a narcissistic father and you go visit him, okay, and you're yellow rocking, great, you're doing such a great job. There'll still be times, because he will poke you, because he's a narcissist, that you may lose it or you may get triggered. So every time you find yourself in that situation, give yourself time to heal. When my client would come back after meeting her father, it would take a month for her.
Wow. And this
And
is
that was
important because so many people are visiting narcissistic relatives, especially now during the holidays.
absolutely
And you want to enjoy the holiday, right? But
correct.
you don't want to be in a bad mood.
Correct. And just know that in spite of all your efforts of yellow rocking, gray rocking, whatever rock you choose, there might still be a possibility, because this is a parent, or if it's a sibling, that they're going to trigger you and you're going to lose it. And you're going to want to come back after that, and you're going to want to heal. If whatever that means, like indulging in compassion and self care for at least a week, 2 weeks, whatever it takes to kind of wash off a little bit that triggering experience that you've just had, but you have to take the time.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone's listening and thinking, you know what, this sounds like something I'm experiencing, what do you want to say to them?
I want to first let them know you're not alone. Okay? There's a lot of people who would share your story, and there's help. Reach out. Reach out, because there's enough therapists out there. If you can't get to a therapist, um, email me, or like Instagram DM me.
Yes.
I will go out of my way to help you with whatever resources I can, distance. But if you can get help, if you can get into therapy, please do, because that healing is extremely important for you and your family or future family.
Yeah, we actually have a friend who I'd say has a narcissistic father and has abandonment issues, right? And this is someone who does go to therapy and they're in this wonderful relationship with someone amazing. And you can see them sabotaging this relationship with this great person because of their past trauma. And we're discussing at this age, I'm 41 and our friends are in that age. And by now you would think people have healed and have
Yeah,
moved on from this. But some people are only getting started.
absolutely.
There's no age
Absolutely.
limit, like you said.
No, no. But look at my client. She started her journey after she was married and had kids. She was in her 40s when she started her journey with me, and it's still going on,
Yeah.
her journey. But no, there is no age, because again, Anisha, you don't know. When a child comes in, like if I have never had, never. Hmm, Yes, I've never had. I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure, but I've never had a client come and say, "Oh, you know what? I'm here to heal from narcissistic abuse because I had a narcissistic parent."
Right.
It's just never happened. People don't have. We don't go around as children. We don't go around labeling our parents.
No.
That's not what we do. So a lot of people have no idea that that's what's going on. I would, recommend to your friend, that the therapist that she's with has an understanding of this, because understanding the world of narcissism is very important. And I'll tell you something, a lot of us therapists don't. We had no course. I think about till last year is when I got trained as a certified narcissistic abuse victims like clinician. But we had no such course. There's one course or one class that we take in personality disorders when in our undergraduate level, and
Yeah.
that's about it. We don't talk about this, but this is so important to talk about because there is so much of it out there.
And just like
And
our friend who we're going to send her your number is possibly ruining something amazing because of the past.
absolutely, absolutely, and she has no idea.
Probably.
Because you see, when she gets triggered, and when she's her emotions, for her, remember, there's also an element of dissonance, right? So, the okay, but I'm justifying, but you did this, and that's why I'm reacting this way. But in her system, that reaction feels okay. So, what she needs to understand is that she's not reacting to what is happening right now. She's reacting to something that happened way back,
Yeah.
when she was a kid.
Well, I'm excited for you and your book. And for everyone listening, definitely get the book. Where can people find your book and where can they find you?
So they can find the book on all the major platforms. It is the hardcover or the paperback is releasing January 14th. However, the ebook now on Amazon is available to pre-order if people would prefer getting
Yeah,
the ebook.
pre-order the book, and it's also a great Christmas gift, also, if I may say so. I think people want to educate themselves, people are interested in this topic, and people might be going through this themselves.
Absolutely. And I want to tell, because there are other books on narcissism out there. Of course, this is the only one that, like I said, talks about father-daughter relationship. But they're very prescriptive. This one has a lot of heart. And I deliberately did that because I feel that I think all of us are going to find pieces of ourselves in the client, right? So I really wanted, in addition to, of course, there are chapters of psychoeducation, like, the roles of the children,
Yeah,
and the kinds of narcissists and stuff. But the meat of the book is really this client's journey, but
yeah,
also the message of hope and empowerment, because look where she is today,
right.
right? And people can get there as long as they are okay going on this journey. Now, how they can find me? They can, so my website is
Yeah.
drbuxani.com. They can like Instagram me.
And all the
They can go on.
information will be
Yes,
tagged on
perfect,
my
perfect.
socials, Buxani Counseling Care, and the book is available for pre-order, the ebook, and the hard copy will be available January 14th, 2026 for everyone
Absolutely.
listening. And is there
Yes.
anything you want to say to the listeners as a message before we sign off?
I just want them to be filled with hope. I really want them to know that their healing is possible. And it's in fact, it's empowering to be able to go on that journey to heal. So please, don't take this as okay, this was my fate, and
Right.
I can't do anything about it. You absolutely can. You can't write the past, but you can definitely write your future.
And maybe working and beginning the journey of healing and possibly contacting someone like Dr. Buxani you are breaking the barriers for your own future and leaving space for something new and amazing to come in versus holding on to this trauma.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And think about the message we're giving our children too, that it's okay to ask for help.
Absolutely. It's a gift to yourself.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening. And if anyone was listening to this and it brought up some difficult feelings, well, you have resources. You can contact Dr. Buxani. And thank you, Dr. Buxani, for your time and coming on here. And we're all excited in our community for your book. And I feel privileged that I already got to read it.
Thank you. Thank you, Anisha. And thank you for doing this. Truly appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Of course. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.